The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished stone and floating platforms. Representatives from over 400 species filled the curved seats that rose toward a ceiling lost in artificial clouds. For 12,000 years, this chamber had been the heart of galactic civilization. Wars had been ended here. Treaties signed. Entire species had risen to greatness or been condemned to extinction based on decisions made in this very room. Ambassador Linda Morris stood at the entrance, taking a moment to steady herself. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult years. Behind her stood a small delegation of human officials, their formal uniforms looking plain compared to the elaborate dress of other species. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 300 years. In cosmic terms, they were infants. Remember, Linda said quietly to her aide, a young man named Daniel Perry. No matter what happens in there, stay calm. They want us to react. They want us to look primitive and emotional. Daniel nodded, though his hands were shaking slightly. He had seen the images from Kepler 44b. Everyone had. The chamber fell silent as the human delegation walked toward the central speaking platform. Linda could feel thousands of eyes watching her, studying her, judging her. Some of those eyes belonged to species that had welcomed humanity into the galactic community. Others belonged to those who had always viewed humans as a mistake, a primitive species that had somehow stumbled into space travel before they were ready. High Arbiter. Zethrak sat at the center of the council leadership circle. He was Vorn, a species of crystalline beings that had dominated galactic politics for over 3,000 years. His body was a collection of floating geometric shapes that shifted and rotated slowly, catching the light in ways that were meant to be beautiful but struck Linda as cold and calculating. The representative from Earth may speak, Zethrak announced, his voice carrying through translation devices to every corner of the chamber. Linda stepped onto the platform and activated her display console. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, she began, I come before you today to report a crime. Not a minor violation or a diplomatic misunderstanding. A crime against all principles this body claims to uphold. She touched a control, and the air above the platform filled with holographic images. A planet blue and green and beautiful. Cities nestled in valleys. Farms spreading across fertile plains. Children playing in parks. This was Kepler 44b, Linda said. A human colony established 47 years ago under Section 7 of the Expansion Protocols. 82,000 people live there. Farmers who grew food for nearby stations, teachers who educated the next generation, doctors who healed the sick, families who simply wanted a new life among the stars. She changed the image. The beautiful planet was gone. In its place was a scorched wasteland. The cities were craters. The farms were ash. Nothing remained. 6 standard weeks ago, a Vorn expeditionary fleet entered the Kepler system. They sent no warnings. They made no demands. They simply opened fire. The bombardment lasted for 3 hours. When it was finished, every man, woman, and child on that planet was dead. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species shifted uncomfortably. Others remained still, watching to see how the Vorn would respond. Zethrak rose from his seat, his crystalline form pulsing with light. The human representative presents a distorted version of events. The colony on Kepler 44b was established in violation of territorial boundaries that predate humanity's emergence into space. The Vorn Collective was within its rights to remove the intrusion. Those boundaries were never communicated to humanity, Linda replied, keeping her voice steady. We were never told that system was restricted. We followed every protocol we were given. Ignorance of the law does not provide immunity from its consequences, Zethrak said smoothly. Perhaps if your species had taken more time to study galactic history before rushing to expand across the stars, this tragedy could have been avoided. Linda felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. This was exactly what they wanted. Even if we accept your claim that the colony was established in restricted space, the Council's own laws are clear. Article 12 states that no military action may be taken against a member species without a formal tribunal. No hearing was held. No warning was given. 82,000 people were executed without trial. Provisional members do not enjoy full protections under Article 12, another council member interjected. This was Delegate Morvith of the Khazari Dominion, a species closely allied with the Vorn. Your species understood this when you accepted membership terms. We understood we were joining a civilization of laws, Linda said. Not one where genocide is administered whenever a powerful species feels inconvenienced. The word genocide echoed through the chamber. Several delegates rose in protest. Others called for order. Zethrak raised one crystalline appendage, and silence gradually returned. The human representative uses inflammatory language, the High Arbiter said. The action on Kepler 4 for 2b was a lawful enforcement measure. Nothing more. Linda looked directly at him. Then humanity formally requests an emergency tribunal under Article 19 to review this action and determine whether council law was violated. This time, the chamber truly erupted. Article 19 had not been invoked in over 1,000 years. It was designed for exactly this situation. A mechanism for any member species to demand accountability from the council itself. But it had been buried in procedural requirements and political resistance. Left to gather dust while the powerful continued to do as they pleased, Zethrak's form flickered. With what might have been amusement, Article 19 requires unanimous consent from the council leadership to proceed. The Vorn Collective votes against. Request denied. You cannot simply refuse, Linda said. We just did. Linda stood very still for a long moment. The chamber watched her, waiting for the outburst, the tears. The primitive human emotional display they had been expecting. Instead, she simply nodded. Then I have nothing more to say to this body. She gathered her materials and stepped down from the platform. Except this. Humanity came to the stars hoping to find wisdom. We hope to find species more advanced than ourselves, not just in technology, but in morality. We hope to learn and grow and contribute to something greater than ourselves. She paused at the chamber entrance and looked back at the assembled delegates. Instead, we have learned that the strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. You have taught us a valuable lesson today, High Arbiter. I hope you will not come to regret it. Linda walked out of the chamber, her delegation following in silence. Behind her, Zethrak's crystalline form pulsed with dismissive light. The humans will adapt to their place, he said to his nearest advisor. They always do. Every young species believes itself special. Every young species learns otherwise. In orbit above the council homeworld, the human diplomatic vessel prepared for departure. Admiral Kevin Walsh stood on the observation deck, watching the planet shrink below him. His communications officer approached with a tablet. Sir, Fleet Command confirms. The 2nd and 4th fleets are moving to staging position Omega 7. Kevin nodded slowly. Send a message to Admiral Carter. Tell her to begin full activation of all reserved units. And Patricia? His aide looked up, sir. Tell her the line has been crossed. The ship jumped faster than light travel, leaving the council homeworld behind. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity was preparing its answer. The frozen moon of Arcturus 7 had no official name in council records. It was a dead rock orbiting a dying star, far from the major trade routes that connected galactic civilization. No one lived there. No one cared about it. That was exactly why Linda Morris had chosen it. 3 months had passed since the council had dismissed humanity's request for justice. In that time, Linda had traveled to 17 different star systems, meeting in secret with representatives of species that had their own reasons to hate the Vorn. Now, in a cavern deep beneath the moon's icy surface, those representatives had finally gathered together. There were 12 species in total. Some were old, their civilizations stretching back millions of years. Others were young, barely older than humanity itself. They had different bodies, different cultures, different ways of seeing the universe, but they all shared one thing in common. They had all suffered under Vorn rule, and they had all been told to stay silent. Linda stood at the center of the gathering, her breath visible in the cold air despite the heating units struggling to warm the cavern. Around her sat beings of every shape and size. Crix of the Manthary swarm was an insectoid creature with a segmented body and compound. Eyes that reflected the dim light like broken mirrors. Salaith of the Dormi was an aquatic being contained within a mobile tank of water, her tentacles pressing against the glass as she observed the gathering. Others were less recognizable, beings of energy, or gas, or living crystal, each representing millions or billions of their kind. "Thank you all for coming," Linda began. "I know the risk you have taken by being here. If the Vorn discovered this meeting, the consequences would be severe." "The Vorn discover everything eventually," Crick said, his voice a clicking whisper transla. Ted threw his communication device. "They have eyes everywhere. Informants in every government. We are probably being watched right now." "Then let them watch," said a being called Torith, representative of the Silari Collective. His body was humanoid, but made entirely of shifting shadows. "Let them see that we are no longer afraid. Are we not afraid?" Salaith asked, her voice bubbling through her tank's speakers. "I am afraid. My people have been dying for centuries because of the Vorn. They control our breeding pools. They decide how many of us are allowed to exist. If they learned I was here, they would reduce my species' population quota by half."
Ow.
Linda nodded. "That is exactly why we are here. Each of you has a story like that. Each of you has been crushed under the Vorn's heel while the Council looked the other way. I want to hear those stories. I want to document them. And then I want to discuss what we can do about it." For the next several hours, the representatives spoke. The stories were terrible. The Manthary swarm had lost 14 million people 70 years ago when the Vorn destroyed their primary food production centers over a trade dispute. The Doremi had been forced to accept population controls that had reduced their numbers by 40%. The Solari had been driven from their homeworld entirely. Forced to live as nomads in the spaces between stars, every species had a similar tale. The Vorn had dominated the Council for 3,000 years. And in that time, they had systematically crushed any species that might one day challenge their power. They did it slowly, carefully, always finding legal justifications for their actions. A territorial violation here. A trade infraction there. Each action was small enough to ignore, but together they formed a pattern of deliberate oppression. 82,000, Linda said when the testimonies were finished. "That is how many humans died on Kepler for to be. A tragedy beyond words. But compared to what you have all suffered, it is almost nothing. I did not come here to ask for your sympathy. I came to offer you something none of us have ever had, a chance to fight back." Crix's compound eyes focused on her. "Fight back?" The Vorn controls 60% of the Council fleet. Their technology is centuries ahead of most member species. How do you propose we fight against that? With this, Linda activated a holographic display, showing detailed schematics of Vorn warship design. "These are the vessels that destroyed our colony. They are powerful, heavily armored, equipped with weapons that can devastate a planet in hours. This is what the Vorn show the galaxy." She changed the display to show a human vessel. It looked primitive in comparison, smaller and less elegant. This is what humanity has shown the galaxy. Simple ships. Basic weapons. A young species still learning to navigate the stars, Linda smiled. "We have been very careful about what we show." She changed the display again. The human ship's exterior remained the same, but now its internal systems were revealed. Advanced quantum computing arrays that no other species possessed. Weapon systems that operated on principles the Vorn had never discovered. Engine designs that broke several known laws of physics. "When humanity joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago, we made a decision," Linda explained. "We knew we were entering a dangerous universe. We knew there were species that would see us as prey. So we showed them what they expected to see. A primitive, struggling species that posed no threat to anyone. We let them underestimate us. You have been hiding your true capabilities?" Torith asked, his shadow form flickering with surprise. "We have been preparing," Linda corrected. "Not for war. We never wanted war. We hope to prove ourselves through diplomacy, through peaceful contribution. We hoped that if we were patient enough, the galaxy would eventually accept us as equals." "And now?" Salath asked. Now we have learned that patience has limits. The Vorn will never accept us. They will never accept any of you. As long as they hold power, every species that is not Vorn will live in fear. She looked around the cavern at the gathered representatives. Humanity proposes an alliance, a secret coalition of species that have been forgotten, ignored, and oppressed. Together, we have resources and knowledge that the Vorn have never suspected. Together, we might be strong enough to challenge them. And if we fail, Crix asked, then we die fighting instead of dying on our knees. The discussion continued for many more hours. There were objections and concerns and fears to address. Some species were too afraid to commit. Others needed to consult with their governments. But by the time the gathering ended, 11 of the 12 species had agreed to join the coalition. The 12th, the Velith Communion, was too terrified of Vorn retaliation to participate, but they promised to keep the meeting secret as the representatives departed through hidden transport systems. Daniel Perry approached Linda with urgent news. Ambassador, we have intercepted Vorn fleet communications. They are mobilizing the 3rd Expeditionary Armada. Linda felt her stomach tighten. Destination: Earth, 200 warships. They should arrive in approximately 6 weeks. For a moment, Linda allowed herself to feel the fear that she had been suppressing for months. Earth, her homeworld. 8 billion people who had never asked for war, who simply wanted to live their lives among the stars. Then she pushed the fear down and turned to face Daniel. Send word to Fleet Command. Tell Admiral Carter her guests are on their way. Yes, ma'am. Daniel hesitated. Ambassador, do you think we are ready? Linda looked up at the cavern ceiling, imagining the stars beyond the ice. I think we are about to find out. Fleet Commander Vectros stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Crystalline Wrath, watching as his armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human solar system. 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of Vorn engineering, each one capable of destroying a small moon. It was the largest fleet ever assembled to punish a single species. Around him, his officers moved with practiced efficiency, running scans and establishing formations. Vectros felt something close to boredom. He had led punitive expeditions before, against species far older and more advanced than these humans. Every time, the result was the same: a brief display of resistance, followed by surrender or extinction. The galaxy had long ago learned that challenging the Vorn was suicide. Commander, his tactical officer reported, we are detecting the human defense fleet. Approximately 40 vessels gathered near the 4th planet. 40. Vectros' crystalline form pulsed with amusement. They send 40 ships against 200. Do they truly believe themselves capable of resistance? Their vessels appear to be the same class we have observed in previous encounters. Basic designs. Minimal armament. Estimated threat level is negligible. Vectros nodded. He had studied the intelligence reports on humanity. They were a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. Their technology was primitive, their military capabilities laughable. The only question was whether to demand their surrender or simply begin the bombardment. Open a channel to the human fleet, he ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human vessel. The commander was a small female with gray hair, her face showing lines of age. She looked tired, Vectros thought. Tired and defeated. Human commander, he began, the Galactic Council has determined that your species poses a threat to galactic stability. You will surrender your homeworld immediately. You will dismantle your military fleet. You will submit your population to re-education protocols. Any resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your planet. The human female stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she smiled. Fleet Commander Vectros, she said. My name is Admiral Catherine Brooks. I command the Human First Defense Fleet, and I need to tell you something important before we begin. Begin what? Your destruction? No, Catherine said. Your education. She touched a control on her console. You see, the Vorn have been watching humanity for 300 years. You sent observers to our worlds. You studied our ships. You analyzed our technology, and you concluded that we were weak, primitive, no threat to anyone. Catherine leaned forward slightly. Have you ever wondered why a species that developed fusion power in less than a century suddenly struggled to build decent starships? Have you ever asked yourself why our technology seemed to stop advancing the moment we joined the galactic community? Vectros felt something unfamiliar stirring in his crystalline matrix. It took him a moment to recognize it as unease. Your species reached the limits of its capabilities. This is common among younger races, is it? Catherine shook her head. Let me show you something. Throughout the human solar system, lights began appearing on the tactical displays. Ships that had been running silent for months suddenly activated their engines. Vessels emerged from behind planets, from within asteroid fields, from hidden bases on frozen moons. They came from every direction, hundreds of them. Then thousands. Vectros watched his tactical display with growing horror as the red icons multiplied. Impossible. Our intelligence indicated. Your intelligence saw what we wanted you to see, Catherine interrupted. We have been hiding our true capabilities since the day we joined the Council. We hoped we would never need to reveal them. We hoped that if we were patient, if we proved ourselves through peaceful means, the galaxy would eventually treat us as equals. The human admiral's smile faded. But then you murdered 2,000 of our people, and we learned that patience has limits. The final count appeared on Vectros' display. The human fleet numbered over 1,200 vessels. Many were small, yes, but others were enormous, bristling with weapons that did not match any known technology profile. You have more ships, Vectros said, forcing confidence into his voice. But numbers alone do not determine victory. Vorn technology is superior. Our shields are impenetrable. Our weapons are devastating. You cannot fire, Catherine said quietly. The human fleet attacked from every direction. Their weapons were unlike anything Vectros had ever seen. Beams of energy that seemed to bend around Vorn shields. Missiles that accelerated faster than any tracking system could follow. Some human ships simply vanished and reappeared in the middle of the Vorn formation, unleashing destruction at point-blank range. The crystalline wrath shuddered as the first impact struck its hull. Damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Ships that should have been invulnerable were being torn apart. Return fire, Vectros commanded. All vessels return fire. The Vorn weapons activated, unleashing the fury that had destroyed countless civilizations. But the human ships moved with impossible agility, dancing through the barrage like they knew where every shot would land before it was fired. For every human vessel hit, 10 Vorn ships died. The battle lasted for hours. For hours of chaos and fire and screaming crystals, as the most powerful fleet that Vorn had ever assembled was systematically destroyed. Vectros watched his tactical display turn from confident blue to desperate red as ship after ship was lost. When it was finally over, 173 Vorn vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 27 had surrendered. Human losses totaled 11 ships. Commander Gregory Adams approached Catherine's chair on the bridge of the Endurance. His face was pale, still processing what they had just accomplished. Admiral, the Vorn commander, is requesting communication. Catherine nodded. Put him through. Vectros' image appeared on the display. His crystalline form was dim and fractured, the equivalent of a human covered in blood and bruises. He whispered, "How is this possible? You were supposed to be primitive. You were supposed to be weak." Catherine looked at him with something that might have been pity. "That is what we wanted you to believe. The Vorn have been bullies for 3,000 years, Vectros. You never learned that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The Council will send more fleets. They will not stop until your species is extinct. We are counting on them to try." Catherine stood from her chair. "But before they do, I want you to carry a message back to your masters. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that the line they drew around humanity no longer exists. We have removed it entirely. And tell them that if they send another fleet, we will do the same thing again. And again. And again. Until they finally understand that humanity will not be bullied, threatened, or destroyed. Or they can choose a different path. They can sit down with us and discuss a new way forward. A galaxy where no species dominates others through fear. That choice is theirs. Communication ended. Catherine turned to look out the viewport at the wreckage of the Vorn Armada, floating silently among the stars. "Send a message to Earth," she said quietly. "Tell them we won. Tell them it is time for Phase 2. Gregory nodded. "And what is Phase 2, Admiral?" Catherine smiled grimly. "Now we go to the Council, and we finish what they started." The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Delegates shouted at each other across the vast hall. Some demanded that humanity be expelled from the Council immediately. Others called for the total destruction of Earth and every human colony. Still others, their voices barely audible above the noise, suggested that perhaps it was time to negotiate. High Arbiter Zethrak sat at the center of the leadership circle, his crystalline form flickering with stress. For 3,000 years, the Vorn had controlled this chamber. They had decided which species rose and which species fell. They had shaped galactic civilization according to their will. And now, in a single day, everything had changed. The Third Expeditionary Armada had been the pride of the Vorn military. 200 of their finest warships, crewed by their most experienced officers, equipped with their most advanced technology. It should have been enough to destroy humanity 10 times over. Instead, the Armada was gone. Destroyed by a species that the Vorn is considered barely capable of building functional spaceships. The chamber fell into sudden silence as the main doors opened. Ambassador Linda Morris walked in, but she was not alone. Behind her came representatives of 12 other species, the insectoid Mantheri, the aquatic Dormi, the shadow beings of the Solari, and 9 others. They moved together, a unified front that had never been seen in the Council's long history. "The human delegation requests the floor," Linda announced, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet. Zethrak's form pulsed with barely contained rage. "You dare to come here? After what your species has done? After what we have done?" Linda walked to the speaking platform and looked up at the High Arbiter. "Let me remind this council of the sequence of events. First, the Vorn Collective destroyed a human colony without warning, killing 2,000 civilians. Second, humanity requested a tribunal to investigate this action. Third, the Council denied that request. Fourth, the Vorn sent a military fleet to destroy our homeworld." She paused. "We defended ourselves." "Nothing more. You destroyed a Vorn Armada," a delegate shouted. "A Vorn Armada that was coming to commit genocide against our species," Linda replied calmly. "Were we supposed to let them? Is that what the Council expects from its members? That we should stand still and die when the Vorn decide we are inconvenient?" The chamber stirred with uncertain murmurs. Many species had wondered the same thing over the centuries. The Vorn's punitive expeditions had always been accepted as a fact of galactic life. No one had ever fought back successfully. No one had ever survived. "Regardless of the circumstances," Zethrak said, "the destruction of a Council military force is an act of war. Humanity must face consequences." "We agree that someone must face consequences," Linda said, "but we disagree about who." She activated the chamber's main display system, filling the air with documents, recordings, and images. "Over the past 4 months, humanity has been conducting an investigation. With the help of our allies," she gestured to the species standing behind her, "we have compiled evidence of over 400 instances where the Vorn Collective violated Council law." The display showed records of unauthorized military actions against member species, images of sterilized planets and destroyed cities, testimony from survivors of Vorn aggression spanning 3 centuries. "The Mantheri swarm," Linda continued, "has lost 17 billion citizens to Vorn attacks over the past 300 years. Each attack was justified by some minor infraction. A trade dispute, a border violation, an insult to a Vorn official." Crick stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the images on the display. "My people have been slaves to fear for generations. We accepted it because we believed we had no choice. The Vorn were too powerful. The Council supported them. What could we do?" The Dormi, Linda continued, "I've seen their population reduced by 40% due to Vorn-imposed breeding restrictions. restrictions that were never authorized by council law. Salaith's tank rolled forward. My species is dying. Slowly, deliberately. The Vorn are killing us, and they have been doing it so gradually that most of the galaxy never noticed. One by one, the other species added their voices. The Solari spoke of being driven from their homeworld. The Keth Collective described centuries of economic manipulation that had reduced them to poverty. The Varith Union revealed that their leaders had been assassinated whenever they tried to challenge. Vorn dominance. The evidence was overwhelming. The Vorn had not simply been enforcing council law. They had been using the law as a weapon, selectively applying it to maintain their power while ignoring it whenever it suited them. These accusations are fabrications. Zethrak's form flared with desperate light. The Vorn have served this council faithfully for 3,000 years. You have ruled this council for 3,000 years, Linda corrected. There is a difference between ruling and serving. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species watching in silence. I know what many of you are thinking. The Vorn are powerful. Even now, even after their defeat, they control the largest fleet in the galaxy. Why risk their anger? Why change a system that has maintained stability for so long? Linda's voice hardened. Because stability built on oppression is not stability. It is a cage. The Vorn have convinced you that their rule is inevitable, that challenging them is suicide, that the best any species can hope for is to stay quiet and hope they are not noticed. But that is not civilization. That is tyranny. She turned back to face Zethrak. Humanity proposes a complete restructuring of the Galactic Council. Equal representation for all member species. Laws that apply to everyone, including the powerful. An independent judiciary that cannot be overruled by military force. No more provisional memberships. Every species enters as equals. Or the system means nothing. And if we refuse, Zethrak demanded, then you can explain to your people why you chose pride over survival. Linda's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. Humanity did not come here to conquer. We came to build something better. But make no mistake. If you force us to continue down the path of war, we will. And our coalition will grow with every battle. Every species that has suffered under your rule will join us. Every secret grudge, every buried resentment, every memory of lost worlds and murdered children will rise against you. The chamber was utterly silent. Finally, a delegate from the Silurian collective rose to speak. The Silurians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, respected for their wisdom and neutrality. The human proposal has merit, the Silurian said slowly. For too long, we have allowed fear to guide our decisions. We have accepted injustice because we believed ourselves powerless to change it. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps the only thing we lacked was the courage to try. Other delegates began to speak, adding their voices to the call for change. Species that had been silent for centuries suddenly found their courage. The tide was turning. Zethrak watched as his coalition crumbled. 3,000 years of carefully maintained power was dissolving in minutes. His form grew dim, the light within him fading. There will be a vote, he said at last, his voice hollow. The motion is whether to accept humanity's proposal for council restructuring. All members will register their position. The vote was not close. When the final tally appeared, over 70% of the council had voted in favor of change. Linda Morris looked up at the results, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. It was not over. There would be years of negotiation ahead, endless debates over details and implementations. The Vorn would resist at every step. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy had a chance to be free. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Sol. 1 year since humanity had revealed its true strength to the galaxy. 1 year since the Galactic Council had voted to transform itself from an instrument of Vorn dominance into something new, something that might actually deserve the name civilization. The council chamber had been completely rebuilt. The old design, which had placed the Vorn at the center with all other species arrayed below them, was gone. In its place was a circular amphitheater, where every delegation faced every other as equals. The seating was arranged alphabetically by species name, not by power or wealth or military strength. It was a small change, but symbols mattered. President Marcus Taylor of the United Earth Government sat in the visitors' gallery above the main floor, watching the proceedings. He was a tall man in his 60s, with kind eyes and hands that still showed calluses from his youth working on his family's farm. He had never expected to lead humanity through the greatest crisis in its history. He had never expected to win. Beside him sat Linda Morris, now serving as Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, and Admiral Catherine Brooks, who had traded her military uniform for civilian clothes. They watched in silence as the new council conducted its business. The first item was the trial of former High Arbiter Zethrak. He stood accused of crimes against sapient life spanning 3 centuries, unauthorized military actions, forced sterilization of populations, enslavement, genocide. The evidence that Linda's team had gathered was overwhelming. Zethrak offered no defense. His crystalline form was dim and still, drained of the arrogance that had once made him seem invincible. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentence was permanent exile to an isolated system at the edge of the galaxy, where he would spend the rest of his existence contemplating the suffering he had caused. But it was the second item on the agenda that truly mattered: Council President Salaith. The Dormy representative who had joined humanity's coalition from the beginning rose to address the assembly. Her tank had been upgraded with new technology, allowing her to project her image above the chamber for all to see. The Council now moves to ratify the Declaration of Sapient Rights, she announced. This document, drafted jointly by human and Doremi scholars with input from over 200 member species, establishes universal protections for all conscious beings within Council space. The document appeared on every display in the chamber. It was simple, almost deceptively so. Every sapient being has the right to life. Every sapient being has the right to liberty. Every sapient being has the right to determine their own future. No government, no military force, no economic power may infringe upon these rights. The vote will now commence. Marcus watched as species after species registered their approval. The Manthari voted yes, their delegation clicking and buzzing with something that sounded like joy. The Solari voted yes, their shadow forms swirling with visible emotion. Even some former Vorn allies, recognizing that the old order was truly dead, added their support. When the final tally appeared, the declaration had passed with an 87% majority. It was the most decisive vote in Council history. Admiral Brooks let out a breath she had been holding. We actually did it. No, Linda corrected gently. We started something. Whether we actually did it depends on what happens next. Laws are just words until people choose to honor them. Rights are just promises until someone is willing to defend them. You think they will? Catherine asked. Linda looked down at the assembly, at the hundreds of different species gathered together. Some had been enemies a year ago. Some had never spoken to each other before. Now they shared the same chamber, the same laws, the same fragile hope for a better future. I think we have given them a reason to try, she said. That is all anyone can do. That evening, a small gathering took place aboard the Endurance, which had been permanently stationed near the Council homeworld as a symbol of humanity's commitment to the new order. Admiral Brooks had insisted on hosting a dinner for those who had been there from the beginning. Linda Morris, Daniel Perry, Commander Gregory Adams, and a few others who had risked everything when victory seemed impossible. The observation deck offered a spectacular view of the stars. Ships of a dozen different species passed by on their way to new frontiers, their running lights creating a river of colors against the darkness. Daniel Perry raised his glass. To the ones we lost on Kepler 44b, to everyone who fell at Sol, to all the species that suffered under the Vorn's rule and never saw this day. This is for them. To them, the others echoed, drinking deeply. Catherine Brooks stood by the viewport, her reflection ghostly against the stars. You know what I keep thinking about? She said. The Vorn thought they were teaching us a lesson. They wanted to show us our place. They wanted us to understand how small and weak we were. Instead, Marcus prompted. Instead, they taught us that we were right to hope. Catherine turned to face the others. Right to believe that a small group of determined people, or a small species of determined beings, can change things that seem permanent, can fix things that have been wrong for thousands of years. Linda nodded slowly. The council drew a line around what they considered civilized. They told us to stay on our side, know our place, accept what we were given. When we crossed it, they tried to destroy us. And we removed the line entirely, Catherine finished. Now there are no boundaries. No hierarchies. Just possibilities. Marcus walked to the viewport and looked out at the passing ships. When I was young, I used to look up at the stars and wonder what was out there. I imagined ancient civilizations, wise and peaceful, waiting to welcome us into a galactic family. He smiled. What we found was different, harder, more complicated. But maybe that is how it should be. Maybe wisdom is not something you find. Maybe it is something you build together, through struggle and sacrifice, and refusing to give up. Outside the viewport, a Manthuri trading vessel passed close to a Vorn transport. A year ago, the Manthuri ship would have changed course immediately, afraid to share space with their former oppressors. Now they flew side by side, their crews probably waving at each other through the windows. It was a small thing, but small things added up. Linda Morris watched the scene and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Optimism. Not the naive optimism of someone who had never known hardship, but the hard-won optimism of someone who had seen the worst of the galaxy and still believed it could be better. The work is not finished, she said quietly. It will never be finished. Every generation will have to fight for these principles, will have to defend them against those who want to return to the old ways. There will be setbacks and failures and moments when it seems like everything we built is falling apart. She turned to face her friends, her colleagues, the people who had helped her change the galaxy. But that is what it means to be alive. To struggle, to hope, to keep pushing forward even when the odds seem impossible. She smiled. That is what it means to be human. The stars burned cold and eternal outside the viewport. Somewhere out there, new colonies were being established. New alliances were being formed. New species were discovering that they no longer had to live in fear. The line had been removed, and in its place, a new galaxy was being born.